Hey there. In this lesson, we are going to take a little bit closer look at the formation of gametes and the process of fertilization. So we hopefully already know that the process of meiosis creates gametes. For males, this is the creation of sperm, and for females, we make eggs. Well, the process of meiosis, specifically in males, is called spermatogenesis. Okay, so right, sperm, and then the word genesis. So genesis like beginning, and then sperm as in like a vessel. So creating sperm. So that's what spermatogenesis means. So essentially, what happens right in meiosis, right? We start with what's called the germline cells. So these are like they're like stem cells, but they are specific cells that only exist really at the very beginning, kind of before embryonic development. These germline cells can become any type of specialized human reproductive cell through the process of meiosis. So the germline cells give rise to gametes. So we still have, DNA replication. We undergo, prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase during mitosis, and then this creates what's called a primary spermatocyte, or just kind of that very first cell. Spermatogenesis itself occurs during puberty. So this is different from females. So males do not create their sex cells or sperm until they hit puberty, when all of their hormones, right, start to kind of become more active. So spermatogenesis, which again is just meiosis for males, you still go through meiosis 1 and meiosis 2 in order to create 4 mature sperm that can then be used in sexual reproduction. So spermatogenesis is pretty much your standard meiosis, where you have meiosis 1, meiosis 2, resulting in 4 viable sperm. We're just kind of looking more closely at creating just sperm. Now, for females, okay, it's a little bit different. So meiosis for females is called oogenesis. Okay, now the germline cells that we talked about before still exist. They're still going to form our reproductive cells. They just are known by a different name because they are found in females. Now, scientists believe that most, if not all, oogonium cells, or the cells that go on to become the egg cells, develop when the human female is still just an embryo. This is completely different from males, because remember, we just said males, they do not form their sex cells or their sperm until they hit puberty, so like 13, 14 years old. Females, on the other hand, are already born with all of the eggs that they will ever have for their life. So males can keep making sperm, right, beginning at puberty up until the day they die. Females, they pretty much have a set number of eggs that they can make, and they're already born with them, right? So again, right, we're pretty sure all or almost all of the eggs, right, develop when the human female is still just an embryo. So pretty crazy. The other difference between meiosis in males and females is that the process of meiosis actually pauses in the middle of metaphase 2. So you go through all of meiosis 1, you kind of start meiosis 2, but it is paused until that oocyte, it's technically not an egg yet, until that oocyte becomes fertilized. Now, if that cell is fertilized by a sperm, then it'll finish the rest of meiosis 2 and actually develop into an egg, or into what's called an ovum. Ovum, egg, same thing here. Um, Once the nuclei from the egg and the sperm unite, that's when the embryo can start to develop in that process of right, embryonic development, becoming a baby. So a couple differences there between meiosis for males and females. Nothing that you would necessarily see on your exam, but just a little bit more information to show how different this process is between males and females. Um, Now, the other thing with oogenesis is that if you'll recall, at the end of spermatogenesis for males, right, we still got our 4 viable sperm. Well, for females, the end of meiosis, right? So we posit metaphase 2, then hopefully we were fertilized, and then we finished meiosis 2. But at the very end, during cytokinesis, the cytoplasm, when developing those last 4 cells, is going to divide unevenly, right? And what happens is you end up with only one viable oocyte, or one viable ovum. I'm so sorry. All of these O words. So the end of meiosis for females in oogenesis, sorry, you are left with just one mature ovum or one mature egg. The other 3 cells are called polar bodies. They are essentially junk. They a lot of times get reabsorbed by the body, and they are typically never going to be fertilized, right? And yeah, they are normally not going to develop. I think that word got cut off on the bottom here. I apologize. If you have been paying attention to the news, this is 2024 as I record this, there is a lot of hoopla in the news recently about an octopus in Hendersonville that is pregnant. But this octopus has been alone. There are no male octopuses in the tank, but this female is pregnant. And it has not been near a male octopus in like 5 years. So everyone's like, what in the world? Like, how did she become pregnant? And there are 2 theories right now as to how that happened. Theory number 1 is the male shark in the tank bred with the female, sorry, it's not an octopus, it's a stingray. I'm so sorry. It's a stingray. So we might end up with like a shark stingray hybrid. Didn't realize that could ever happen, but apparently that's possible. But then the second theory is that this female stingray has reproduced through a process called parthenogenesis. Basically, what happened is one of these polar bodies in her reproductive organs ended up combining with that mature egg, and she basically self-fertilized an egg in order to become pregnant. This is actually very common for reptiles, but it has never been seen before in stingrays and other mammals. So that's just something pretty interesting that's happening in the world right now when it comes to meiosis and sexual reproduction. So I just wanted to throw that in there. So the last bit of just this little bit of extra for our notes is talking about fertilization. So fertilization, if we'll recall, is when the egg and the sperm combine. Now, fertilization is typically going to occur in the fallopian tubes. Again, we're talking about human females, ignoring any other mammals. So in order for fertilization to happen, the sperm has to travel all the way up through essentially the female reproductive tract, get to the fallopian tube. Hopefully there is an egg waiting for that sperm there. The sperm does have to pass through a lot of protective layers kind of like around the egg in order to get in. But once the sperm does get through those protective layers, the egg will then immediately kind of reinforce itself in order to prevent double fertilization. So it really is one egg, one sperm. A lot of this is controlled through hormones and other chemical signals. It's super crazy and complicated, but also very fascinating. But because fertilization occurs in the fallopian tube, afterwards, normally the fertilized egg would then travel further down into the uterus, where it would implant in the uterine wall, and you'd get a normal pregnancy. But sometimes what can happen is that fertilized egg doesn't move and it gets stuck in the fallopian tube, and so you end up with an ectopic pregnancy where you have a fertilized egg that's starting to develop in the fallopian tube. That is incredibly dangerous. The fallopian tube is the size of a hair. So if you were to pluck a hair off your head, like that is the width of the fallopian tube. So a child cannot develop in that. It is incredibly dangerous. But in a normal scenario, the fertilized egg would travel down into the uterus, and then you would have your diploid zygote starting to be formed. So you go from 1 cell to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 8, right through the process of mitosis. It's also thought that a lot of the organelles and other structures are provided by the egg. So really the only thing that the sperm is donating is genetic material. Sorry. The only thing that the sperm is donating is genetic material, and pretty much everything else comes from the egg, which is why, if we go back for a second, the egg as a cell is huge compared to the sperm. I think in your notes it says it's something like 30 times larger. So I don't know, it'd be like a basketball and then like a grain of rice. That's probably not a perfect scale, but it's close enough. Um, so that's it for these kind of notes. Again, taking a little bit of a deeper dive on gametes, meiosis, and fertilization. If you have any questions or concerns, just let me know.